What's up, guys and ghouls? You're listening to Agamemnon from the Brand System. This is Wumble channel of the Brand System, and this is my second attempt at recording this, but the show must go on. Okay, I'm gonna be talking about how I got here, how I became a full-time freelancer. I have been in this position for a few years now. I started full-time freelancing in my early 20s. But obviously, I started taking art seriously long before that. It was in high school. If you're American watching this, when I say high school, I mean middle school. Because you guys just got different words for everything, haven't you? My fine art teachers obviously didn't prefer illustrative styles, but they were particularly hard on me. And unfortunately, some of them were hard on me in kind of a racist way. I swear, the number of times that a white English art teacher told me that my art looked too anime or too Asian. Whew! Oh, it's an upsetting thought, boys, my blood's up. Not all of them were like that, of course. Some of them encouraged me a little and helped me to find my creative voice, which I'm really grateful for. And, you know, being one of the only students of colour at a selective private school, as a scholarship student, I was always facing that kind of thing. It was not just art teachers, it was a lot of them, and other students too, directing classism and racism at me. That's just the way it was. Shout out to that maths teacher though, who was super autism friendly and understood that doodling in class was like an important stim for me to help me get into a high concentration kind of mindset. He really got it, he understood. Also, my creative writing teacher in sixth form, for the Americans, sixth form is what we call high school. But we take courses there, like we choose what we do in sixth form, so it's kind of like college, but we're high school age. So basically, yeah, instead of going to high school, we have college. Yeah. My creative writing teacher at sixth form was an absolute doll. I loved her to bits. She was so encouraging. She understood that I had kind of a unique cultural identity and kind of actually encouraged me to use that in my work. She knew how to keep learning fun. She used to take us on field trips where we'd just sit in some crazy place in the middle of nowhere and write together. The first ever webcomic I wrote, Flirting with Death, started out as a project that I submitted for an assignment to this teacher, and she told me she'd love to see it as a full story because the scene I'd written was intriguing. I asked her what she thought of me making it into a comic, and she encouraged me. If it weren't for her being in my life, in my educational life, I never would have learned the skills that I needed to create comics. So yeah, it was a huge mixed bag with my teachers. University was way better. I never got the completed illustration degree at art school. Sadly, during my second year I got really ill, but I got about half an illustration degree before I dropped out, so that's good enough, right? Because I was taking illustration, the teachers were far more on board with what I was doing. Okay, they understood the vision, they were in my corner. I did really well when I was studying, but sadly, my health had other plans. It turns out that burning yourself out on deadlines is not a good idea if you have a chronic illness, but I was not aware of just how chronically ill I am at that point. Now, I made attempts at traditional employment, attempts being the key word there, but like I said, I didn't know how extensive my chronic illness was. So I had a few jobs where I never really lasted there. I think the longest I had one of those jobs was maybe 8 months. Then I found out I was disabled, so I started disclosing to employers that I was disabled. I hoped that this would make things easier. But unfortunately, workplaces in the UK kind of have a massive institutional ableism problem, so when you tell them you're disabled, it just doesn't help, it doesn't help, it doesn't help, it does the exact opposite, it makes things worse. I had 2 formative experiences of quitting a job in pure frustration of how I was being treated. First one was a retail job where the managers kind of resented me for having extra needs. Honestly, everyone at that job treated me like I was getting special treatment, even though I just have health conditions. But one of the managers did something egregious, and basically accused me of having done something I demonstrably had not done. I was immediately upset by this and told them to please just check the security footage. I would happily check it with them, and they can see what really happened. They told me they would serve me 2 weeks' notice. They didn't even bother checking the security footage, so I said don't bother. I wrote a very angry note in the signing out book, and then just staged a walkout. Because fuck 2 weeks notice. If I am being mistreated in the workplace, I don't want to stay there another second. I walked right out in front of customers, in front of the managers, in front of everyone. I like being dramatic. I have said it before and I will say it again, I have a flair for the dramatic. But I'm glad I did it. I really am. I think that manager deserved to be embarrassed in front of his customers, because who treats an employee that way? It was not the straw that broke the camel's back though. Unfortunately, I hadn't learned my lesson. I was offered a job in a position that was related to my skills. Being a writer and artist who had never done a job relevant to my skills, I was so excited about this. This company hired me for transcription and interviewing. And you know, being a writer, I was like, oh, I get to transcribe stuff. That's like totally something that I know how to do. I did really well at that job. I got really good feedback from everyone that mattered, and everyone who didn't too, even the rest of my team, because we were all just worker plebs. The rest of my team also saw me working and thought I was pretty good. But our manager, oh boy, was she an interesting character. When I first started and I got my entering interview, I told her about my health conditions, at least the ones I was aware of at the time. She said not only was this okay and that she would accommodate me, but that she was an advocate for people like me. 2 months. It took 2 months for her to start treating me badly for being disabled. She would get angry at me for having symptoms that I had warned her I was going to have and she had told me would be okay. One time she pulled me aside to a meeting room and berated me. I explained to her that I was on an NHS waiting list for a treatment that would help me out, and I did eventually get that treatment and it did make a difference. But you know what she said to me? She said this wasn't good enough. She said I needed to call the clinic and demand that they bump me up the waiting list, which if you don't know much about the way the NHS works, that's medical malpractice. She told me that if I didn't do this, I was failing to take ownership of my shortcomings as an employee, because everyone knows that you just are no good at your job unless you're willing to demand that a doctor commits malpractice. Absolutely cuckoo bananas. That's all I have to say. I was so upset by the end of that conversation that I was red in the face and on the verge of actually straight up crying. She told me to take 5 and then get back to my desk. I had had enough, so the next day I simply didn't show up and I sent an email saying that I was never showing up again. And after that, I was actually quite traumatized. Every time I was sending a job application, I would freeze up and straight up panic. And I would spiral, thinking all they're gonna do is treat me badly just like the last 2. Sure, nowadays being a full-time freelancer is making me happy, but at the time, it was out of necessity. I dragged my arse down to the job centre and yeah, I signed on. The way that welfare works in the UK is kind of unique. We have the Department of Work and Pensions, which handles all welfare. That's child welfare, disability welfare, all of it under one title, Universal Credit. When I first started out, I got the regular standard universal credit, I got housing support, I got all that shit, and I got self-employment support. But eventually, I did manage to get assessed for disability benefits. I was found to have something called a limited capacity. The way that limited capacity works is it's a disability benefit for people whose disabilities affect their ability to work. The way it's set up right now, I get disability benefits and I am expected to work only on days when I feel well enough to do so. My typical work hours are about 25 a week because that is the best I can do. I straight up have problems with my connective tissues, so my body hurts a lot and I get sick a lot. It is just necessary for me to work 25 hours a week. Anyways, I advertised my ass out on forums, I built a portfolio, I eventually managed to get together enough clients. I'm still having recording issues, but I'm pushing through. I wowed those clients as hard as I could. I was friendly with them and I got the work done and I did it well, and eventually I had repeat clients, and that's what you want. And that's how I was able to start full-timing. I mean, 25 hours, but still, from the perspective of someone with limited capacity, that is full-time. Also had my store, which also makes me a little money on the side, it all adds up. And originally I was with Redbubble, but I switched over to TeePublic eventually because Redbubble has problems. One of the coolest things that's ever happened to me when it comes to my store is I had one work I did go viral. It was that expressionist painting of Cheems. It was so good and so popular that Facebook meme pages were stealing it. Because, yeah, meme pages sure do love just reposting someone else's art and calling it a meme. Someone drew that, bozo! But beyond all the trouble and strife, I sold a lot of prints and t-shirts and such. You can still get that Cheems design, by the way, on my TeePublic. You want it? You want it? You want it? You want it? You can go get it. There's a link in the description to my card, and on my card there's a link to my TeePublic, so you can go get it. I'm really good at this advertising thing, I'm really good. I love advertising. I love everything my corporate overlords do. Lucky every time I see an ad I get slightly angry. I think it's the autism. And there's one more thing. There's one more thing I did to help myself creatively, and that's getting to know the local artists. I kind of originally just did this because I wanted more friends who were artists, and I'm so glad I did this. But now that we're all gradually becoming increasingly successful, we help each other out and work together. One of them is a musician friend of mine runs a local event and has taken me on as creative lead. So I'll be designing all the posters and creating all the visual stuff. It feels amazing to work with your friends. I feel like Chris O'Fucking-Neil right now. But as you've probably grasped from this video, I went through quite a lot of hardship to get where I am. I went through so many traumatic experiences with those corporate jobs. And eventually my disability meant that I was practically unemployable by their standards. But I am glad that it's been working out for me. I am really relieved. For some people, an art career never happens, but I was so determined and so desperate to never work a corporate job again. Somehow I managed this. Every day I'm so grateful. If you're thinking of opening commissions yourself, remember, always get the payment first before you start working on it, whether that's 50-50 or all up front. Get that damn money first, don't get scammed. And with that note, that's been it from me for today. That is that on that.